What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. I'm the design lead of Summoners Rift Team's live pod, and I'm here to talk to you about some of the changes coming into patch 15.1. Random context, it's 1 a.m. for me right now, and I had some energy, and I wanted to make this video, which is why it's lower scope, and it's just some of the stuff going into the patch. I will probably do another video at some point about the rest of 15.1, but the stuff I have been working on hit PBE today, or I guess technically yesterday, and so I want to make a video about it to explain some of the thought processes and context around what's going on here. For what it's worth, if you want to see some of the context and design decisions around feats, Endstep put a video up on his YouTube channel about the design of that. If I remember, I will link it below. If not, I will remember at some point to link it in the comments somewhere. Anyway, that's a thing that I wanted to bring up that another designer on the team has talked about some of the stuff going into 15.1. Let's talk about what's in this video and stuff I've been working on recently. So there are changes to lane minions. There are changes to some fundamental turret rules. And then there are some small to small-ish kit updates to Kalista, Ashe, and Varus. These are the things that I worked on that are going to 15.1 as, like, yeah, essentially, I'm not doing any, like, balance change to 15.1. I'm doing changes that are, yeah, like meant to be directionally useful for the game. So let's talk about why these things are the things and what's going on here. So why are these grouped together? Because this seems weird to have like some random champion kit updates as well as like fundamental rules changes to minions and turrets. So the starting point was actually we were thinking about ways to mitigate lane swaps in pro play. They came back. The very simple changes we thought of, such as increasing turret fortification, were painful to the regular game. Being a top laner and dealing like 3 damage per auto turrets sucks. We don't like that that exists. It's not a great rule. It's arbitrary. It's only in top and mid, and it actively diminishes the experience of playing those lanes for a lot of people. And so we're not happy that it exists, but it helps, and it gives us a lever, a thing to do that helps us diminish lane swaps. And so with Worlds being over and nothing else in flight, I was tasked with looking into and talking with people on the team and people adjacent to the team, like, okay, let's figure out all of the influences to why teams lane swap, what things can we do to make it less prevalent, and ultimately, what are changes that, what we eventually decided on is what are changes that we can make that we think are good for League of Legends, the game, and also affect lane swaps. Now, we could, and so what we basically came to with this is that if we make it a little bit safer to be under tower, if we make it a little bit safer to be in lane, if we make it a little bit harder to crash big waves and then tower dive, if we make it harder to freeze lanes against people and thus lock people out when they're kind of underpowered against you, if we make dives harder, and if we can make some of the really, really, really strong early matchups less sharp, each of these can do a little bit in lowering lane swaps, and in each of these cases, we are comfortable with each of these things. Now, a lot of these are going to be value judgments. For example, a very senior designer who I respect a great deal was like, hey, what if we just made last hitting harder and required players to like relearn this like strong mastery of last hitting minions? Now, everyone else I had talked to, whose opinions I also respect, were like, no, I fucking hate making last hitting harder. We should never do this. So like, this is just a very specific example to say that like, some of these things you are never going to get consensus on. That's the fun of design, is there are very, very few slam dunks. You're hoping for a 90-10, you're hoping for an 80-20, in terms of like, this is a lot of good and a little bit of bad backwards, but like, that's okay, it's worth it in the end. From what I can tell in my experience with like looking out at design and now doing design myself, there are trade-offs with almost everything you ever do. And there will be disagreements with anything you ever do. I think it's just pretty much true. I think design is much more of an art than a science. Anyway, yeah, so it's things that are good for the game that we think will also affect early game pro play as lane swaps to some degree. I do not believe that this will bring lane swaps out of the pro play. I don't think it will remove lane swaps from pro play. I think that's really, really unlikely. I think it will make them a little bit less likely. Okay, let's talk about what's going on here otherwise. What we could have done, this would have been bad for the game, and it would have been like, it would be a more egregious version of turret fortification. We could have made rules that say, if you do a lane top, get bent. If top lane detects 2 champions and neither is a jungler in top lane, no longer give gold or XP for minions. Could be a rule. I can build it in an hour. It would kill lane swaps. It is also unacceptable to put in the game. Because, like, how are you meant to learn that, like, because Blitzcrank roamed up, you can't clear the wave anymore, and now you lose the game because you lost 100 gold and 200 XP? Like, again, we're not doing that. So it is worth noting, though, that I think if you wanted to absolutely turbo kill lane swaps with fire, you would probably need some extremely strong map effects that said you're not allowed to be top lane. Maybe, right, there's maybe something there with like a much higher scope and whatever, but like that's not this, right? To be clear, there will still be lane swaps in pro play, but this is where this work came from. Is let's make changes good for the game that we think are good for the game. And let's improve League of Legends, specifically targeting early game, essentially safety. What it comes down to, essentially safety, but that wasn't like the umbrella exactly. All right, let's move forward then. Okay, so we are making some fundamental changes to lane minions. Okay, so this whole set, like these 3 lines here, are all basically one mega change together. All right, most minions have their total attack damage dropped by about 10%. That is compensated, though, by there is a bespoke mod that is currently 50%. It's going to 55%. That's 10% more. There is a bespoke mod for how much damage minions deal to champions and turrets, and that is, again, 50%, going 50 to 55, which is 10% more damage. These basically cancel out. They come close canceling out. It's not exactly 1-to-1, but it's close enough that, like, whatever. I'm not giving things like 0.3 less base attack damage. I'm not doing that. So basically changing minion base AD and minion AD scaling to be a little bit different. Actually, one thing I forgot to write here, but it's also here. Minion base health is also a bit lower in the early game. By minute 6, essentially, waves are back to where they were before. So once you hit ultimates and you're hitting like rank 3 to rank 4 of your first skill, minion waves are back to equal, but minions have between like 2 and 10% less health on the first 3 waves. And this is being combined with also minions are doing some percent current health damage to lane minions. So what this means, ultimately, this entire section plus the 4th line that I forgot to write, which is minion health, is that minion waves clear each other about 10% faster than they will on live. So on live, if you AFK and watch a minion wave fight itself, the minion wave will clear out all 3 melees, and then as the casters start to take damage, the next wave reinforces. And so wave 2 meets, and it is natively 9 minions large. Because those cast minions are not dying, they're all going to refocus, and wave 2 is now natively 9 minions large. And by the way, the larger a wave is, the slower the wave ends up moving overall. Let me sort of explain this, right? Let's say, so I actually know the math on this one, right? If a minion fights a minion, and they just DPS each other, they always die in under 30 seconds. It depends on the minion. Cannons, late game, are the tankiest. Melee minions late game are the highest, among the highest DPS. Caster minions are pretty throughout most of the game. Regardless, right? If you're just doing damage to yourself over and over again, they all die in like 20-ish seconds. Depends on game type, but whatever. But if there's 2 minions and they're fighting each other, right? The total health bar has doubled, except that when minion 1 dies, the DPS is now halved. And so if you have a 2-on-2 minion fight, the damage is roughly 2/3 compared to the health, right? Because the health is doubled, but the damage has only gone up by 1.5 because eventually one of them dies. And so it's like, oh, well, and then that keeps happening the more, right, larger the wave goes, which means waves get larger and larger the larger they are. I know this is kind of like weirdly phrased. So what this means is that because waves don't natively clear themselves out in like uninteractive situations, waves natively get larger, which means thus you can slow push, right? Because you can interact a little bit with the wave, deal a little bit of damage, 100 here, 100 there, 60 here, 60 there, just last hit, deal more damage. You learn the mechanics because you know waves natively grow over time. They will automatically do so. And of course, if your wave is bigger, it will crush harder and grow larger, and then, you know, keep going. But what ends up happening is if you make waves clear faster, you can't build as big of a ball, right? Because you either have to kill the enemy minions faster to clear them out, to make them stop damaging your minions. And if you do that, your minions march forward, which means now the reinforcement comes in sooner and starts picking off your minions. before your reinforcements come in because you're farther from the midline. You're also closer to the tower, which means if you are crashing on someone, they are much more likely to be in XP range or in a spot where they can take pot shots and not get poked back because you can't auto them or you can't, land and apprehend on them or whatever it's going to be. And so through a mix of functional minion DPS, which is through here, and a little bit of early game minion health, minion wave clearance is much faster in the early game. Now, worth noting, based on the math here, minion wave clearance on live already gets faster with game time. Ultimately, minion damage ramps faster than minion health does, on average across a wave, canon or non-canon, even though cannons get much tankier than they get damaging. So wave clearance already speeds up with game time. And again, we don't want to change like level 5, 7 breakpoint, so the health isn't going to be any different. But waves will clear faster, which means you cannot build as large of a stack. Now, the reason we're adding this mechanic of percent current health is it is literally impossible to preserve the feel of last hitting while also making waves clear faster. So we either say we are literally never going to change minion clearance rates, or players got to relearn some stuff, or we get really cute. And so we're choosing to be really cute by giving minions percent current health damage and lowering their total attack damage. When it comes time for you to last hit a minion, your minions are doing about the same damage they were on live. So in terms of just last hitting, that's pretty much unchanged. It actually, in playtesting myself, actually feels easier to last hit, which I think is reasonable personally. But that is compensated for by the fact that, how do I want to phrase this? Because minions die faster, your attention is brought back to the wave more frequently. You're going to keep seeing, instead of getting, 30 or 40 seconds to kill 6 minions, you've got maybe 29 seconds, 20 to 29 seconds to kill those 6 minions. Now, the last hits themselves are going to be less fraught because once they're down to 100 health, 80 health, 70 health, whatever, minions will have a harder time finishing that minion off. But you're going to be in that state more frequently, right? So in some ways, last hitting will be harder. In some ways, last hitting will be easier. End result was, hey, last hitting will be relatively similar to live, right? In the ways that it can be, because changing anything by definition must change how last hitting works, while having minion waves clear more quickly. Another thing to do that is going to reinforce this is specifically talking about wave 3 crashes. We are pushing the cannon minion back to wave 4. Now, cannon minions are worth 60-ish gold in the early game, and your 60 gold is being delayed by 30 seconds. That sure sounds like losing 20 gold. So this is actually there's 2 reasons here, right? So we started the rate at which passive gold generation starts 20 seconds sooner. This basically pays the 20 gold that cannon minions are worth. Now, of course, supports and junglers don't farm cannon minions in the direct way, so they're just getting 20 free gold. The other 3 roles are functionally just, well, the cannon's late by 30 seconds, but you're getting, this here, so it's fine. Basically, you're behind a third of a cannon minion at all times. That's why it's 20 gold. But part of the reasons here, and why it's let's start the ramp sooner, is from my experience playing League of Legends, I feel passive gold generation starts too late. The map is already live, minions are literally fighting each other, and there's still no gold generation. And that feels wrong to me, where it's like, yeah, I actually got, Astro Tower Dove, or, we did a scrap on the first wave, and I got an assist, and the assist gave me 48 gold, and I respawn, and there's mini waves there, and it's like, I have 48 gold, and I want a health potion. When the hell am I getting a freaking health potion? And so moving the gold generation time a little bit up means that you shouldn't be in states where the map feels live and yet one of the mechanics is still not active yet. I think that's actually really valuable. I think that's actually kind of important, and it's an ear flick that I've had in the game for the last 10 years or whatever that I finally got to kind of fix. So I think I covered the why pretty well here. There's one other consideration. Let me take my drink of water and then I'll talk about it. Which is a thought on how strongly we want minions to scale. So, how do I want to phrase this? Minions, right now, have a cap on how much their health and attack damage, and in the case of melee minions, armor, can scale. It's a little bit different per minion. For the basic minions, which is melee minions and caster minions, they stop scaling at basically 38 minutes into the game. And for what it's worth, kind of kismet here, 38 minutes is when 90% of all league games on Summoner's Rift have ended. So only 10% of games are played in a part where minions have stopped scaling. Now those 10% are relevant. I mean, 10% of League of Legends is like more than most games, full stop. Which means this is an experience that like literally millions of people run into, is this last 10% of games that go very, very long. And so let's talk about what is important then about that part of the experience, right? Okay, one, I think games should end. I think I'm glad it's only 10% go that late. Like if the average league game is like 29 minutes, 90% of them are done by 38 minutes. Okay, that's not too bad, right? I think that's reasonable. I think it's like a fair timing. I'm not trying to like shove this up to be like, no, they're not allowed to go above 35 or whatever. It's fine. But what should that experience be like much later in the game? I think by 38 minutes, often champs are still earning gold. They're still earning XP. They're still growing. And so in my mind, minions probably should as well. Right? Like they should keep keeping up with game state until the game state truly, at least mostly, isn't progressing anymore. Like I don't really care if Thresh still has item slots open. If the 4 carry rolls are all done, the game is done scaling. I think minions should probably roughly keep up with that. I think that generally makes sense. Because they're just keeping up with the game flow, right? I think that's pretty defensible. I think it's reasonable. Second point, minions should not ever outscale the champions. If we ever get to the point where it's like, it's endgame, just shepherd in your sea of cannon minions and they'll win the game for you. Like, I think that's a really bad experience. So, right, the max cap cannot be like, well, don't worry, Veigar can still do it. It's like, no. Max cap can be that even Jhin feels okay killing minions here. Even, Shen is acceptable. Even, I'm sort of like a low wave clear mage who's, I don't know, LeBlanc probably has pretty bad wave clear. Like, LeBlanc should still feel okay fighting minion waves, right? And she's like probably one of the worst cases here. Annie probably doesn't feel great about it without Tibbers, right? Whatever. All that to say that, like, hey, we shouldn't scale minions above what champions can do. That's probably unreasonable. So the cap needs to be something moderate. And again, the other thing is that it should be about the champions. It should require you to be proactive. But, hey, it's okay if the minions are really good bodyguards for you and can soak up a bit more damage and help you siege the tower, push the tower down, whatever. And so this is something that I am thinking through. There will be probably an iteration in on Thursday or Friday. It'll probably get scraped on the Friday or like next Monday PBE, where there will be some changes to late game minion scaling because, well, technically, Canon and Super Minions scale for like 10,000 hours in some cases. Obviously, games don't go that long, but I changed them all to scale for 90 minutes, right? That way we don't have them theoretically outscale a champion. I don't think melee minions or casters should scale to 90 minutes. If melee scaled to 90 minutes, they would have like 2,500 health. I don't think that's reasonable. That seems too high for a basic minion that's 3 of every wave. I think cannons and supers can be special, right? Supers, I think, quite literally are special and are allowed to kind of go above other minions, but like, we could probably scale the melees and casters to like 45 or 60 minutes. That's probably, they're going to grow after everyone else is done buying items, but as long as we don't outgrow the champions themselves, I think it's reasonable. And then, hey, these are here to like, it's 45 minutes in, it's 50 minutes in, 55 minutes in, like, we're on our 4th Baron. Thankfully, the casters are tanky enough to like not just die to Saver Q, right? That's kind of the point there. Okay. So that's minions. Let's go on to the next one. I think, yeah, that's everything with minions as far as I can tell. Turrets. So there are some turret changes. Now, one annoyance here, not annoyance, that's not the right term for it. One factor here is this project overall spun up relatively late, right? Season 1 was already well in flight. We have a finite number of humans on the team. We have a finite number of artists. So we do not have any art budget for supporting larger changes here. We had new turret VFX added earlier this year. I'm glad we did it. It's cool stuff. Turret shots now get larger the more damage they deal. Glad we got that. That's cool stuff. That's something that I drove on. We got artists to help us get new particles in, and so cool. We have evolving turret particles as they shoot. Awesome. We would like there to be a particle that just represents the state of being heated up. When we have time for a VFX artist to do that, we would love to do that. But until we have that, we cannot swing as hard as we might want to on heat mechanics. So if you don't know, heat mechanics are when a turret hits an enemy champion, it gains a stack of turret heat up to 3. Each stack of turret heat is 40% increased damage. that buff functionally lasts 3 seconds. So if it doesn't hit a champion for 3 seconds, the stacks fall off and the turret is no longer heated. 3 seconds is relatively short. And with 3 stacks of heat, that deals 2.2x damage. That's not even that much damage. Obviously, it really hurts if you're level 3 champion, whatever. But as we've seen from pro play, that's not that hard of a dance to do. You take like one shot at 2.2x, everyone backs up for 3 seconds, which is not that long, and then you go again, and the turret's already cool. We tried other heat durations. We tried 7, we tried 10, we tried 15, and it refreshes on any attack even against minions. Not in that order, don't get me wrong, I went the other way, but even 7 felt too long without more VFX support. And so 5 is as good as we're going to get, which is we're going to ask players to like learn that turrets stay heated for 2 seconds longer. Now you can click on the turret. Turrets have a mana bar. I added that. If you click on a turret, it'll show if it's 0, 1, 2, or 3 to denote their heat state. When their stacks fall off, it also has a buff icon, so you can look at that as well. When the stacks fall off, the mana bar goes back to 0. So it's not the sickest thing ever. Again, we want VFX to sell it well for any like long duration here, but you can at least use this to track the turret heat state, okay? And again, the particle's still there, so we have a significant improvement over what it was a year ago, right? So a couple of moderate buffs here. Turret heat from 40% to 50%, so 2.5x max damage, and heat duration from 3 seconds to 5 seconds, which means, you know, about 2 more turret shots, 2 more minions maybe die between the first one and the redive. These all might matter a little bit. And then because we've made all these changes to wave states and to turret heat and whatnot, I brought turret fortification back down to 50% damage reduction because this rule is its complexity. That is, it is needed, but it hurts top laners and mid laners really commonly, and so I like jump at the chance to be able to nerf this back down because it is a tax that doesn't feel good to put on players. Now, one change I forgot to bring up was cannon wave is pushed back to the 4th wave. I talk about why that is, by the way. I know I talked about the gold part of that one is this now means that when you try to crash wave 3 on, say, like a lane swap, or just we're playing Kate Lux, you don't get to walk to the wave at all, or I am, you know, Akshan or Jace or whatever, you're powerless against me. I can't stack as big of a wave against you, right? With a cannon taking all the turret shots here, my jungler comes in at level 3 and we just kill you on the 3rd wave crash, right? Now that 3rd wave crash is going to happen a little bit sooner, right? Because of all the wave clearance stuff. So my jungler is going to have a hard time getting 3 and getting over there. But also, if you survive the first dive, right, they have to wait 5 seconds instead of 3. And there's no cannon, which means many more minions are dying, which means you're getting more gold, you're getting more XP, and the time pressure is getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And this might do, we think it's, I mean, we know it does a meaningful amount for how tower dives are functional, how functional they really are. In the early game, this definitely does matter. Okay, we then move on to champion kit updates. So Kalista is the one I am proudest of here. Kalista has some issues. Okay, couple of things here. We are making Kalista changes because we think the absolute power level of Kalista levels 1 through 3 is higher than we are willing to support. So what I mean by that is we are fine with champs having good and bad matchups. Some matchups are truly unplayable. Some of that can't really be unwound because it just turns out like Malphite Teemo is just not a playable matchup. Silas Malphite is not a playable matchup. Rumble Malphite. I don't know why it keeps being Malphite. Malphite has a lot of unplayable matchups. He's so sharp. Maybe he shouldn't be, but like there are sharp matchups in the game. Renekton Riven, Renekton and Bessa, like there are sharp matchups. Whatever. On average though, if you are almost always on a say level 1 to 3, the difficulty with being level 1 to 3, by the way, is that you don't have your entire kit online. So it's like, yeah, theoretically, I can handle the fact that Kalista hops and has Rend, but like at level 1, I don't have any of my tools. So the only choice I have is don't play League of Legends. That's what it comes down to. And I want to be clear, like, this is not a unanimously held position. My understanding is this has been discussed by people smarter than me and above me, and this is not a unanimous decision among more senior designers at Riot on League of Legends. But my boss is like, we should do this. And I say, okay. His bosses have not told him no. And so again, this is not unanimous. I'm not saying that like, oh, I don't believe in this. I'm like, I believe in it too. But hey, if you disagree with this, other smart people disagree with you. If you agree with this, other smart people agree with you. So just for context, right? Like many things are not unanimous. Let's get back on topic. which is my belief, and the viewpoint I will defend here, is that when your level 1 and 2 is sufficiently strong, your opponent's only winning move is not to play. And the winning move being not to play is generally a bad thing. This is not to say that games can't have downtime, but if the correct play is don't, there's a pretty reasonable argument against that being allowed to be true. Especially if it's frequently true. If it's like most Kalista matchups, the winning move is don't play until level 3. And then she's still better than you, by the way, but like literally don't play. So, okay, to circle back, that's basically one of the primary drivers here is open up a little bit more room there to be able to play against Kalista. That the trade's a little bit nicer, the gameplay's a little bit nicer. She's still really good, but like you've now got your moments, right? Okay. But also while we're here, man, I would like to make Kalista feel better. Kalista is one of my, at least years ago, one of my most played champions. I used to play a ton of Kalista back in the day. Kalista has some unfavorable rules for her in her passive, and I like cleaning things up. I like leaving things like scripted more sustainably than they were in the past, and I like, how do I phrase this? Yeah, I like making champions feel better. This is something that I'm actually trying to focus on a little bit as a designer, is doing a better job with champion feel. I think I'm quite good at analyzing and developing systems. Like character feel is like on the like matrix of things I'm good and bad at, one of my worst traits. And so anytime I can do a better job here, I want to. So like Swain, for example, is feeling a lot better than old Swain, which is good. I'm like improving on that axis. And I think I can make Kalista feel better here as well. Anyway, so I know it's kind of went backwards, but we want to do this, and then I want to do this. And so we're doing both, right? So make her passive better, make her passive feel better to use. Okay, so let's focus on this for a little while. All right. Kalista passive has a lot of, well, not a lot of. Kalista passive has some flaws under the hood. Okay, so I basically changed all the scripting around how Kalista's dash speed is calculated. Pop quiz, tell me everything you think factors into Kalista dash speed. Or like, you know, like write it down in a notepad or something. What are the factors of Kalista dash speed? All right. Well, I will tell you. So the designer who implemented Kalista's most recent version of her passive tried to account for the fact that Kalista has has non-standard attack animation growth. That's not the right term for it. Close enough though. So Kalista, among champions like Senna and Rek'Sai and Darius and several others, her animation doesn't speed up linearly with attack speed. What that means is, right, instead of attacking twice as fast, being the animation twice as fast, the animation itself won't be twice as fast, but the time between launch attack 1 and launch attack 2 will be, which means the animation doesn't get as fast, but the like recoil to start throwing again, that gets significantly faster, right? And so the designer tried to account for that fact, tried to do a bunch of math. From what I could tell, that math was done incorrectly, because all that ends up happening is Kalista still tries to scale the try to scale things linearly. Like it just wasn't done quite correctly, and so at the end of the day, it was being scaled linearly, even though it's not supposed to. What the passive was supposed to do is do a bunch of math and say, okay, so Kalista auto attacks, right? And we know how much attack speed she has. We know her base attack speed. We know her attacks per second. We know her bonus attack speed. We know all these factors about it. And if we look them all up, we can theoretically math out how long is your attack animation until release, and then how long is that post-release timer where you're winding back up. And they tried to make that time the numerator, the denominator for her dash speed, which means, right, if this pullback time is shorter, I have more attack speed, then my dash should be faster, right? The shorter my pullback time, right, the more attack speed I have, further increased by having bonus AS, right? Because this isn't getting very much, but this is getting a ton. And then the numerator, pop quiz, the numerator is how far am I dashing? Did you know Kalista's dash speed scales on where you clicked? Kalista's dash speed, and it still will, by the way, scales on where you clicked. Kalista's dash, if she is auto-attacking, does not go forward as far as it goes backwards or sideways. I think sideways actually is the farthest one. Backwards is a little bit less good than sideways. If you want to have the fastest dash speed possible on Kalista, dash sideways. It then additionally would look up for any multiplicative move speed mods, which were basically always slows or like Master Yi ult. So hey, Kalista players, if you had Master Yi ult on Ultimate Spellbook, that would increase your dash speed. So anyway, it would linearly scale off attack speed, and then it would multiplicatively scale essentially on slows, and it would also scale based on dash distance, right? Couple things here. One, the base attack speed of Kalista was hard-coded at a number she hasn't had for 8 years. So her like the first bit of math used for Kalista dash wasn't accurate, and so yeah, that was kind of unfortunate, right? So okay, I rebuilt like all of it. So it still cares about dash distance, right? It still cares about where you're going. So that's still gonna be a fundamental factor in all this stuff. But I'm looking up her base attack speed now again, like her total attack speed, like correctly. And what I'm doing is, okay, what ultimately is going to happen is Kalista is going to look up her total bonus attack speed. 1 plus her. Oh, the other thing actually is Kalista was actually looking up her. The way it was looking up her total attack speed was like essentially incorrect. It was like overvaluing existing and then not scaling linearly with bonus attack speed purchased. Okay, so I cleaned up all that. So what Kalista is now doing is she is ignoring attack speed slows entirely. They will not affect her. It looks up only her stat bonus attack speed and then adds 1 to it because we're not going to divide by 0 or multiply by 0 or whatever. So if she has a dagger, she's at 1.1. Okay? We're basically going to take that number and use it. We do like random math, just like multiply by 0.7 or 0.4 or whatever, just to like get the number we want, because we want to, because we still need to multiply against dash distance, right? Like we still need like a number at the end of the day to like turn it into a dash speed to divide by dash distance. So like we just need to turn it into a number that we can use that like makes sense, that like lines up with life. Okay, fine. So we look up her bonus attack speed. Great. So that means if you are Malphite-E'd, if you are Frozen Hearted, we ignore it entirely. If you have a dagger, functionally 10% more. Okay. We then look at your stuff. There's actually one more factor here before we go. So we look up your dash distance. We look up your attack speed. We now look up your attack speed more correctly. As far as I'm concerned, we track it now much more fairly, much more linearly. This ends up being a slight nerf early game and a slight buff late game, but it's like within 5% in most cases. So it's like you're not going to notice it actually. There's another thing that happens, which is, I forgot to mention this, but it was true. It still is true. We try to push your dash speed toward 1,000. If the end result of your dash speed would be 1,000 or higher, we stop doing, it's just that number. We don't do anything. If it was under 1,000, we essentially put a minimum at 600. We say whatever the difference between this derived dash speed and 1,000 is, multiply that difference by 0.6 and add it in anyway. So if your theoretical dash speed would be 1, it is now 600.4. Okay. That's fine. That came in, though, before the slows, which means, right, even if you were Malphite-E'd and Randuin's and whatever, you're just, like, completely screwed, and it was like, well, your initial floor is 600. But then that 600 would then say, well, what is my multiplicative move speed mod? Oh, my Malphite queued? All right, we'll cut it in half, or whatever. Okay. And then the Kalista passive had an actual floor of 300. If you were Withered and Frozen Hearted and Malphite-E'd and everything else, you would always dash at least 300. That floor is still there, by the way. And the push towards 1,000 also still there, by the way. Right? The like quasi minimum of 600, that is still there, by the way. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, our baseline is slightly different because we're just doing different kinds of math. Right? Like the literal underlying formula is just not the same. We're not using the same variables. And so the baseline is adjusted. This ends up being, again, within about 5%. It means that very, very high attack speeds, this is 8% better. roughly. At lower attack speeds, it's like about 5% worse. You're not really going to notice it because 5% worse then still goes into the like push towards 1,000 and you're just not going to feel it. Again, we ignore attack speed slow. We only look at bonus attack speed. We do not care about your total attack speed at all. Which means, oh yeah, by the way, this means that like Frozen Heart would actually slow down your Q dashes because the dash function is used for all of her dashes. So if you were Malphite Eid and had Frozen Heart on you and you tried to Q dash, your dash would be slower, even though you're not attacking. So that's no longer going to be true. Again, Q uses the same flow as her passive because they're both her passive, right? So we now ignore attack speed slows. We care less about move speed slows. So I am still factoring your move speed into the calculation, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm essentially, I mean, what's really happening is I'm taking your total move speed, adding 345, I think it's the number, around there, and multiplying that sum by like 0.14. And the result of that is a number that's about 1. That's the point. The point is to come up with a number that's like 0.98, 0.1, 0.104, whatever. But it means that like if I'm slowed, right, if my move speed were literally 0 somehow, this number would be like 0.5. And if my move speed were 700 for some reason, this number would be 1.5. But the cool thing about this is this looks at her actual total move speed, which means it already looks at diminishing returns and says, yeah, if you're withered and your move speed is 104, well, it's 104 plus 345 is 450 roughly. 450 times 0.14 is like 500-ish or 0.5-ish or whatever, right? 500. So it's like, oh, that's like not horrible. Like, okay, I'm getting my move speed has been crushed into the dirt. I'm only dashing half as fast, right? And my dash wants to be like 1,000 units. So it goes from 1,000 to 500 instead of 1,000 to like very clearly the minimum cap is 300. So what I ran into essentially by just like, here I'm Fordham Kalista fighting a Nasus. The old dash against Wither would be 300. In the worst cases of Wither, it's like 450. The floor is still there at 300. I don't think it's possible to get that bad. But I guess like if you were a theoretical level 1 Kalista with no bonus dash speed and no boots and anything, and you got Withered and Frozen Heart and whatever, you might still hit the minimum cap of 300. But like, it's not really going to happen. And so again, it means it also cares about move speed bonuses. The one thing I am worried about a little bit here, even though I think this is good for Kalista, we are not necessarily going to solve all of the pros Q issues she has, because it means like Lulu and Renata give move speed. And so they're going to make her dash faster. That is very real. What's nice though, is that like regular Kalista players can feel good about this. Like one thing that is true is that Lucian players on live play an incredibly large number of their games with Nami, because players just start playing Lucian Nami together and feel good about their synergies. We are likely to get into a state where like players will be more willing to play Melio, Lulu, Renata, whatever with Kalista, because it's like, oh, cool, synergy, sweet. And even though that's obviously kind of a pro pairing, we can see it in solo queue as well, and Kalista players can feel good about it, right? Because their Enchanter players will be like, I'm helping, yay. Of course, this is powerful, right? Like, this is just, she's gaining win right here. She's gaining, obviously, power here. She's getting a ton of feels here by the dash feeling better. So there are, of course, some nerfs, okay? Basically, the stacks past 1 damage of her E is going down. It's going to be relatively equal from like level 5s onward, especially in on-hit builds. For lethality builds, it's going to be worse because there's an AD ratio nerf here, but like, it's pretty close otherwise. So that's just strict power negative. The Q base damage is down by 10. And the Q mana cost is up by 10. This basically gives her way less poke overall. This is like power negative. Like these are like literally just nerfs. There's like no compensation here really at all. This is clearly power negative. This is power positive, and the overall result is like very feels positive. What's cool is from playtesting, Kalista players have felt like they are less screwed by slows, and the people who have slows still feel like they are effective and they are affecting Kalista because they are. So what's nice is actually we're meeting expectations of Kalista players and her opponents, which is awesome. That's really good to see. Next one, Ashe. So very similar thing, right? Let's investigate Ashe. The 1 to 3 is really egregious on Ashe. She's extremely early game skewed. Her data looks like Kalista in terms of what she does in the early game, which is wild because like Kalista's Kalista and Ashe is doing kind of similar things. Now, again, much like Kalista, we're not trying to make her not an early game champion, but we're trying to say, hey, the 1 to 3 is like kind of unplayable for opponents. Can we slow that down? Also, as a longtime Ashe player, she actually be my highest master AD carry. I really hate some of the stuff that her passive does that like actually punishes you for playing Ashe. So I would like to clean that up. All right. Really simple. W is being changed from total AD ratio to a bonus AD ratio, and the numbers are being shifted so that levels 1 through 4, volley is weaker. Levels 5 through 18, volley is stronger. The gold scaling is unchanged, but you're going to spike at 7 and 9. It's going to be slightly better at 5, but you're going to spike at 7 and 9, which is early game. Level, like, if this was the only change here, this would probably be win rate positive to Ashe. Actually, I know it would be win rate positive, but it would be weaker. It literally is weaker 1 through 4, and then it's literally stronger 5 through 18. So this is power positive, but it's weaker 1 through 3, which is what our goals are. Again, we're fine with Ashe being an early game champion. It's not a big deal. I think Ashe being a scaler would be a problem. Like, Ashe being a DPS scaler would be a problem, right? It's fine if she happens to be good late game because utility is good. That's not the same thing. Okay, next thing. This is the meat of the change. The passive is always active. You always get the bonus damage. They don't have to be slowed first. However, there's longer base damage here. The passive will read your attacks deal 100% damage at level 1. It's like, yeah, thanks. But also the icon's there, so you know what skills will crit. I always hated, I'm full build Ashe. I've got my Infinity Edge, I've got my Hurricane, I've got my Lord Dominic's, I've got my Shield Bow or whatever. I right click you and I deal 103 damage. You know why? Because I can't crit. Oh, sorry. You wanted me to volley? He's behind a minion wave. I literally can't do it. Yeah, sometimes your Q is ready. Neat. Sometimes you volleyed them first. Cool. Not every time. I have 100% crit chance, and I deal 0 bonus damage. Hated that. I hated that. So I said, no. Her passive, just if you hit them with a Q, with a Hurricane Bolt, with a right click, it just deals whatever the math is, okay? It just does the morphing. But of course, that's quite powerful. Duh. But the 115% damage is gone. That is obviously a lot of power. We know about every 5% here is worth like 1.5% or so win rate, which means this nerf right here is 5-ish% win rate off of Ashe. Now this is probably 1% or so by itself. This, I think, is being somewhat undercounted. Of course, I could be wrong. There is a chance that Ashe is in a really, really bad state, and that this isn't enough power, but I think it is surprising. I think you would be surprised how often you get screwed by this rule. By you just like literally not getting your damage. And then, of course, because I don't think this remotely compensates for this change, buffing the Q, doing a flat 5% total AD on the Q, and buffing the attack speed by Q rank up by 0 to 10%. So you're not going to feel anything but the total AD until level 8. And then it's 2.5% attack speed per rank, which is like not a ton, but it's there. It means there's no fractional percents in the rank up, which is kind of nice. So right, the goal is Q is strictly buffed, W is win rate positive, this is win rate positive, it's strictly buffed, and of course this is a 5% win rate nerf. Which these all have to make up for, which I think is pretty close, to be clear. But that's the point. So what it means is that Ashe doesn't functionally have 75... doesn't functionally have 68.5 base AD. And of course, doesn't have... Well, I mean, okay. We'll take a step back. Everyone has 15 bonus AD from runes and masters, whatever. So it's like, instead of having 75... functional total attack damage, she had 85 total functional attack damage, which is higher than every other champion in the game. Like, no one has a 10 damage on hit. In the case of Corki, his base AD is like 48 or something to compensate for his passive. And the fact that I know he's going to get a stat shard into Doran's Blade, whatever. Ashe just like has the highest base AD in the game. I mean, maybe Kalista wins. Or, yeah, actually, I know Kalista wins. Kalista E completely beats Ashe passive, but like, maybe Kaisa passive is kind of close if you can hit actually 5 times. But Ashe is like, has the strongest autos in the game at level 1, so it's like, well, I hit you first from 600 range, I have this volley slow, which means you're not getting away, I have a perma slow on you, and I have the go fast towards slowed people in the inspiration tree. I don't remember the name of the rune. Not Cosmic Insight, I'm griefing. Either way, yeah, if she hits you once, she just runs you down with 90 attack damage. Yeah, of course you lose. Of course. So now she runs you down with 75 attack damage. Much more fair. Because she literally can't out DPS you, right? She is just a normal champion, but you're slowed. Okay, right? She might have rank 1 volley. Okay. She might have Q. Oh, okay, she does more damage than you. She had to hit 4 times first, but that's totally reasonable. But she's no longer just like, oh, I'm permaslowed and she has more attack damage than me. If I run away, I lose. If I fight you, I lose. So that is a pretty big deal. It should make it a lot easier to fight back against her. She's still got volley poke, right? She also still has 600 range. She can still poke you more than you can poke her? Yes. But she does not automatically win all ins without getting more things going on. And again, goal is power neutral. Goal is a power reshape. And I actually believe that sort of long term, Ashe is 1% or so underpowered. She's one of the easy 80 carries. And also, I think it is reasonable for us to very lightly inflate utility champions. In terms of measured win rate, I think solo queue teams are often lacking utility. And so just having it engage when everyone's playing like, Yasuo with no knockups and a Viego and whatever, like who's going to start the team fight? It's not Janna. It's not Lulu. Here's an Ashe arrow. Hey, we fixed the team comp. I think some of that like is win rate, but isn't power essentially in a sense, right? Like measuring win rate appropriately means Ashe should probably be above 50 because she's fixing comps sometimes, and I don't think we should like punish you for fixing comps. Anyway, moving on. The final champion change, this one's incredibly low scope, is Varus. Varus' solo queue data doesn't look like Ashe's and Kalista's, but I look at Varus in pro play and I'm like, this champ looks completely silly at level 1. He has 575 range, so he outranges you. E plus Comet plus Scorch plus Mana Flow is untradeable. I actually looked. Varus has 125 more range than either Syndra Q or... Oh, there's another Q I wanted to look at. I forgot. Nico. Nico and Syndra both feel like they have like relatively low counterplay, easy to land Qs, and they're both 800 range, and Varus is 925. Now, I don't think changing the range is appropriate. I think that is a really like large feels impacting change. But we can be like, hey, Varus, you should only press E when you pop Blight. Don't press it for poke. And so what we did for that is base mana down by 40, E mana cost up by 10, which means instead of getting like 4 E's, you get 3. 3 E's does not push someone out of lane. You have to do a lot more to push them out. But we dropped the Q mana cost by 15. That within 3 casts makes it for the base mana cost nerf. That's very likely to happen. And it says, look, Varus, you can be a good early game champion. We're not trying to take that away from you. You can have good spells. You can poke from range, but use your Q. Q is how you're going to do that, because Q has gameplay. Q can hide behind minions. Q has a cool dodging paradigm going on. Q is actually dodgeable. E is undodgeable. If you're paying attention as Varus, E is landing every single time, and it's triggering Comet, it's triggering Scorch, doing all the stuff, and it's like, yeah, he's just going to get you. So, not much else to say, right? It's a 3-line change. But it is, again, hey, let's let level 1 through 3 feel more playable, right? Oh, the other change I forgot, there's a 4th line change. W is being stretched. It's like -2 at rank 1, +3 at rank 5. Instead of going, I think it's like 8 to 32 or something is becoming 6 to 36, something like that. Yeah, so there's that change. That's pretty much it. That's the patch. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.